Religion gets a lot of flack because of the way it's presented. But if you really get down to the core, the underside of these ancient teachings, it's what Aldous Huxley called the perennial philosophy. And that is the idea that there is meaning in life, that we are more than what we see. We're more than the physical body. We're more than the physical brain. That whatever this essence is that created, sustains, whatever, all that we see and what we don't see, isn't some entity that you can either believe in or not believe in. It's the essence of who we are. But if we just know that this is not random, we don't have to understand it, and what we do come to understand, we don't have to agree on. Just that it's almost like placing a bet on this means something. And I decided a long time ago that we have a choice. We can live our lives as if it is about toy collection. How much money can you make? How good can you look to other people? How much stuff can you have? Or that it actually has meaning in everything we do, whether that's in our work for animals or humans or making people healthier or whatever.
Welcome back to Plant Field. As always, I'm your host, Callum Weir. Welcome back, legends. And if you're new here, nice to have you here. Today's conversation is one that asks a simple but powerful question. What if aging didn't mean decline? We all know the cliches, the creams, the supplements, the false promises of anti-aging. But what if the real answer is not really about fighting time, but more about living differently, about choosing vitality, about choosing movement, nourishment, even spirituality in a way that keeps us not just alive, but fully alive. That's where today's guest comes in, Victoria Moran. Victoria is a writer, a speaker, a long-time yogi whose work has touched thousands. At 75 years old, she radiates the energy and the presence that most people would guess belongs to someone probably a decade younger than that. She calls it aging like a yogi. Not chasing youth, but embracing practices that give us strength, peace, and yes, even that glow that turns back the clock. In this conversation, we explore what it really means to age well, from foods that fuel longevity, to the role of yoga and spirituality, to even those 7 pivotal moments that shape who we are. We talk about staying active, eating to nourish rather than restrict, and how to reframe the later decades of life as time not lost, but of possibility. So whether you're 25 or 65, whether you're feeling stuck in old patterns, or curious in just what it means to thrive in the long haul, this episode is here to challenge, inspire, and maybe even shift the way you think about your own timeline. And just before we jump in, do me a favour. If you're listening and thinking, damn, I want to look half my age and feel twice as good, then hit follow, share this episode, and leave a review. It costs nothing, but keeps these conversations alive and means I can keep bringing you people that walk the walk. Alright, let's get into it. To Victoria Moran, let's dive in. Peace and plants. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you, Callum. It's a pleasure to be on your super popular podcast.
I only just clocked this, and I think if I arranged this a week ago, I was also in New York City, so we could have actually done this in person.
Well, next time. Or
next time.
Maybe I'll have to come to London, my favorite place on earth.
Yeah, I was about to say, you spent a lot of time in London in the past, haven't you?
Yeah, I moved to London on my 18th birthday because it was that swing in London time. It was just the most important place to be. And I'd always loved British history. I remember as a little kid, I had an LP record about the story of Robin Hood, and I would play it over and over again. I can still hear this beautiful kind of Redgrave sort of voice saying, "And in the days of Richard the Lionhearted." And so when the Beatles happened, when I was 14, it just opened up a whole world for me. I got a press card for $1 that you could get at that time, but I was really serious with mine. I got into my first Beatles press conference when I was 14, and I befriended one of their managers, and Paul McCartney bought me a drink when I was 17. And it was like, I got to move to London. And so made that happen. And what was interesting was so much else happened. That was really where I became vegetarian, where I got involved in yoga. It was kind of magical.
Yeah, all these things kind of happen and align the way they're meant to be. Obviously, Paul McCartney like buying you a drink and the Beatles. Is that when they were up and coming, or were they already quite a big hit
Oh,
already?
they were quite, yeah, because I didn't even know about them in the States until they were already popular in the UK. So it was that night in, I think, I don't know, February of 1964, and they were on the Ed Sullivan Show, and just something shifted. I think there's some psychologists that talk about the seven pivotal points in your life, and you can go back and kind of figure out what made you who you are. Definitely the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. It was kind of before and after for me. And that opened up so many possibilities for me in terms of writing, which I've, of course, gone on to use in the vegan and the animal world. And just having the confidence to go out in the world and do adult things in responsible ways. It was quite something beyond just great music and a lot of fun.
You mentioned the seven like pivotal moments. Do you think you've hit all those yet, or there's still time to come?
Well, I hope I have at least one to come. I don't know. I haven't really sat down and see if they add up to seven yet. It's funny thing being in the later years of your life. Like I'm 75 and I don't feel 75. In fact, I started to say I'm 17. It's like, oh, no, you're not. I'm 75. And so I'm very well aware that there is a lot less time ahead than there has been behind. And yet, some of the things are so interesting, things that can be accomplished at this age, particularly in the vegan world, because I do think we have a dearth of vegan grandmothers and grandfathers and kind of elder statespersons because there just aren't a lot of people that have been around for a really long time. And in my case, because I wrote my first book, Compassion, the Ultimate Ethic, when I didn't even know I was writing a book, I thought I was writing the paper for a fellowship that I got when I was in college. I was getting my degree in comparative religions. I went to college a little bit late. So when I had the fellowship to do foreign study, I was 30 and I went to England, Scotland, and Ireland to study vegans because this was 1980. And in the States, there were so few vegans and we were so separated geographically from one another that I was able to convince this fellowship committee to fund my going to the UK to do this work. And when I was there, I was able to meet people from the 40s who had been part of the Vegan Society in its early days. I never met Paul Watson, the founder, with his wife Dorothy, but I met Eva Batt and Serena Coles and Kathleen Janaway, and these names that probably mean nothing in the outside world, but to anybody who's looked at the history of veganism, they're giants. And I remember Kathleen Janaway saying that in the early days, she said, we didn't know if our bones would disintegrate or if we'd perish in a fortnight. We did this from pure disinterested compassion. And I was just standing there thinking, I want to be you when I grow up. And then I got to meet a Lady Dowding, widow of Chief Air Marshal Lord Dowding, who masterminded the Battle of Britain. And she was showing me the photo albums. And one was when she and her husband were at the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II, and everybody at their level of peerage had to wear these ermine robes. They found fake fur. They found fake ermine in the early 1950s. It's stunning. And so, yeah, love UK. Love the history.
You've crammed a lot under your belt in the last, well, all those years. Like, obviously, you got 14 books. You appeared on Oprah twice. You became Peter's sexiest woman over 50. Founder of like Main Street Vegan Academy. You got certifications in so many different fields. Like the list goes on. It really does. It's impressive. Yeah, if we scroll back, all those years to your younger self, younger Victoria, Do you think that she would have seen all these things coming, or was it on the cards for her, or did it just kind of all fall into place bit by bit as she kind of started to discover you?
Yeah. I think always deep inside, I felt that I was supposed to do something meaningful. And I did find an old bucket list. It was something I did not in my early youth, but probably in my 40s. And everything was on there. I could check all of it off. There was one thing it said, make a substantial difference for cows in your lifetime. Now, I don't know why I said cows, because I know that all the animals suffer egregiously and the chickens have it harder than anybody. But for whatever reason, when I was writing that back, in the 1990s, I said cows. And I feel like that's the fire that's under me today, that to make a substantial difference for animals, farmed animals in particular, but any animal I can help. That's what I get up for in the morning. And that's why I hope that I live a long time, as long as I can keep working toward that goal and maybe amending cows and all the others.
Yeah, it is wild that you chose cows out of everything, but at the same time, they are probably the most, out of all the animals, probably the worst off, if not the worst. Obviously, all the other animals at this moment in time are in various different circumstances, but I would assume that cows probably being the worst. So you putting that there obviously had some meaning, even if you don't know what it was at that point.
I think it was that dairy, like for so many people, was the hardest thing for me to let go of. My trajectory from vegetarian to fully vegan at home and out places, it took longer than I would like. I went vegetarian, well, pescatarian, I guess, at 18, vegetarian at 19, and fully vegan, I was 33. And my daughter had just been born. And I was already working in the vegan world. I was writing for the publications that were out there at that time. I was speaking at conferences. And always when I was vegan, I thought I was vegan. I thought I was vegan forever and for keeps. But I had an eating disorder, binge eating disorder. And I would go on an eating binge and I would try so hard to stand there in the convenience store and read all the labels and get only junk food that didn't have any animal stuff in it. But there was very little. There were a couple of kinds of candy bars. And of course, there was just cheese, just giant chunks of cheese, very easy for me to binge on. But after that, I'd have all kinds of remorse and I'd need to get myself pulled back together. And then all of the messaging at the time, not so different from the out in the world messaging that people are hearing now, is, well, if you want to lose weight, you have to be eating egg white omelets and non-fat yogurt and things like that. And meat, of course. I didn't go back that far. But getting from the lacto-ovo to vegan was really, really difficult for me. And in a way, I think it served a purpose, that it gives me more understanding and I'm able to work with people and help them over. And one of the things I just suggest to my fellow vegans who are very frustrated that somebody that they think ought to be low hanging fruit, ought to be an easy convert, that just treat them like vegans. And that's what Jay and Freya Dinshaw from the American Vegan Society always did for me. They had to know that I was falling off the wagon, but they never treated me like that. They never said, like, okay, get your act together or we're not going to deal with you again. They just kept treating me like a vegan until I finally had to fulfill what they had created. They had made this kind of thought form, and I just had to get my life to fill it. So anyway, so I have been fully vegan committed since 1983. It's a very different world, and it's been that and giving birth to my daughter, the best things I've ever done in my life.
You mentioned obviously that you stood in like supermarket aisles looking at ingredients and just kind of seeing what was the healthiest for you, and doing whatever you look at ingredients for, as most people. But weirdly enough, like if you go on Instagram in 2024, 2025, that's like a glorified thing. Like it's glorified now to kind of stand there and you know look at labels and see what kind of oils or what like they have in there. It's kind of glorified. I don't know if that is then fueling obviously eating disorders later on down the line, because not so much for obviously looking for things like milk powder. We all know to avoid that, and a few other bits and pieces. But looking for the healthiest of the health, and literally just watching topless influencers like standing there like being like, this is bad because it has this and this. It's a weird time that something that was conceived as a eating disorder so far back is now just seen as like a normal everyday thing.
It is, and it's very interesting because I'm vegan for the animals, and I actually thought that it would probably harm my health back in the day. I certainly thought it would ensure that I would be overweight for the rest of my life because I reasoned I'll be eating all those carbs. Well, of course, the exact opposite just happened, and we know why now. I don't think it was clear at that time, but we're eating this wonderful high nutrient density food, very satisfying food. It's low in fat and high in fiber, so that means you get to eat until you're satisfied. My whole life, because I had a weight problem as a little kid, so I was always on diets. I was always hungry, and then when I got a chance, all hell would break loose with the food. And so I really do believe in making health promoting choices. And I know not all ethical vegans do. I was in Chicago when I was touring with my book, Main Street Vegan, and this lovely young man was driving me around, and he said, I just don't understand why people have trouble going vegan. Because if I want a chili cheese dog, I have a vegan chili cheese dog. If I want a pepperoni pizza, I have a vegan pepperoni pizza. And I'm sitting there thinking, my arteries are clogging just having this conversation. But on the other hand, he was a young guy. He played sports in college. It was a different time of life. And I think there was a bit of a different appropriateness for him at that time. But to address what you're talking about, this thing that I think some people are calling orthorexia, it's not anorexia, we're eating, but we're just so worried that we're going to eat something that isn't perfect. I think we have to get a little bit out of our Western privilege boxes for a minute. And the story that always comes to mind for me was when I was traveling in Nepal back in the 90s. I was doing some work with Tibetan refugees, and I was in Pokhara and really wanted to go to the Buddha's birthplace. So we arranged all that, not knowing that it was a very, very, very long drive through a lot of mountains. And we'd pass these villages and we'd never stop. And I'm getting hungrier and hungrier. And every time I would say to the driver, why don't we ever eat anything? He would say, no food for Westerners, ma'am. No food for Westerners. And finally, when I was getting that, hangry thing where you start to be kind of mean to people, I was just like, what do you mean no food for Westerners? Is it contaminated or something? And he said, only rice and dal, ma'am. Only rice and dal. And I explained to him that that's actually what we eat. And we stopped, and the rice and the dal were just really runny. They tried to make it spread and have more for less. And so there was a lot of water in it. But it was one of the best meals I have ever had in my life. And I think of people in that part of the world and so many other parts of the world, they're just happy to have something to eat. And it's not highly processed and packaged and wrapped up in cellophane like so much of the stuff people eat in the West. It's just food, and they get along okay. And I have to remember that sometimes because, you can go out to lunch, with a lot of women. Certainly, I hang out more with women, so I know more what we say. And, everybody's doing something. Somebody is avoiding gluten because they just feel like it or because they absolutely do need to do that. and other people are very aware of oil or sugar or something else. And it's fine. We want to take care of ourselves. But I do often go back to only rice and dal, ma'am. I think maybe I can be a little less picky.
I think sometimes it is the basics. Like I'm very much I'm very much Whole Foods. Like and that 20 to 10% will be a pizza or a donut or something once in a while. But like it is the basics. Like if you nourish yourself with whole foods, and then you've got a better chance of like a healthier diet, but you know what you're putting in there as well. Like you don't overly have to worry about the sugars, the salts, the oils, everything people are worrying about in restaurants. And then like if you do have to go to a restaurant or you want to hang out with your friends or do whatever, like as long as you've got the basics there for like 80-90% of the time, like that meal is not gonna harm you. But I think people, as you say, it's a westernized concept more than anything else, where we're worrying about things that don't really matter.
Yeah. And to me, in the old days, we all wanted to be healthy just to prove to the world that we weren't going to die 6 weeks after going vegan. And then raising a vegan child was challenging because there was no precedent. People just didn't know. I actually knew in two cases back in Kansas City where I was living, two cases in the 1970s. Yeah, I think they were both in the 70s. Children were removed from the home because there was no cow's milk in the refrigerator when a social worker came to visit. I mean, this is horrifying. I don't think it would happen today. And of course, now we have all these non-dairy milks, but we didn't have them. I mean, you guys did. You had Plamil like a long time ago. But here in the States, we didn't have anything. There was this guy in Ohio who sold soy milk powder, and you had to order it from him and he would send it out in this clear plastic bag. And we just trusted that it was soy and not like talcum powder because we didn't know. There was no label or anything.
But your soy
So
milk dealer.
yeah, it's easier and better. But I just want to ask you, Callum, what do you think about the products and stuff? Because I think it's wonderful for people to have a choice to be able to get something that's like meat, something that's, like dairy, cheese. And yet there are a lot of people in the whole food world who won't even identify as vegan because they say, oh, vegans just eat junk food.
For me, I don't have an issue with fake meats and things like that. I don't think you should be eating them every single day. Like I don't like I think that's the thing with most things. Like you shouldn't eat the same thing every single day. Like you should have, you know, an abundance of plants on the plate. You should eat a whole foods diet. And then if you want to eat something that is the equivalent of meat or a step or have it for the beginning of your transition where like it's a stepping stone. Like if you were really into meat, then yeah, Beyond Burger is going to be the better option for you. But also it's going to help you transition. But you don't probably shouldn't be living on those forever.
Mm.
Um,
And I don't think very many of us do. I mean, I certainly don't know every vegan on earth, but most of the vegans that I know are hanging out with green smoothies and stuff like that. And yeah, they get excited when somebody brings in a box of vegan donuts because that's a treat.
yeah,
Uh,
I think that's the thing.
but
It's treating it like a treat and not having it as a every single day. And there are people that have that every single day, but those people aren't in it for health. They're kind of like, if I can get a pizza every single day and it like reduces the harm of animals or whatever, they don't care, and that's also fine. Some people realistically don't care too much about their health, and like if that's them, that's cool. But if somebody is wants to care about their health, there is products out there like you've got your tofu, you've got your tempeh, you've got multiple other things along with the rest of like that they count as whole food anyway. But you should be predominantly on those kind of things, maybe seitan. And then if you want your Dominoes, like you have your Dominoes, but don't eat your Dominoes every single day.
okay, tell me as an American, because when you say Domino's, I see a game with,
Oh, the pizza chain.
oh, that
The
Domino's.
pizza chain,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
All
We
right.
I don't know about the States, but Domino's over here they have a variety of vegan options.
That's nice.
unsurprisingly. Yeah, I think we are kind of at the forefront of that, which is quite nice, but also at the same time, like, I don't think anybody's going to like Domino's or McDonald's or anything like that with health benefits in mind.
Yeah. I think that it's everybody has the right to decide how they want to treat their own bodies. I mean,
Hmm.
I really believe in personal autonomy. And yet, I do remember being schooled from early on by Jay Dinshaw and others. You have to be as healthy as you can be because people are looking at you. And it's not necessarily fair. I mean, I should be able to be a vegan for the animals because I feel like being a vegan for the animals. And whether I look good or not, or whether I have good health or not, that's my business or my family's business. It's not anybody else's, but it kind of is because people really are looking at us. I always tell the story of this is about 8 years ago, 9 years ago. My cat had just died. And I was sad, and I was in the subway station, waiting for a train, sitting there, and I'm kind of crying. And this woman came up to me, and she was so nice, and she put her arm around me, and what's wrong? And she just listened, and she was so supportive. And then I got on the train, and I looked out the window, and there she was with two of her friends doing the Jehovah's Witnesses thing. She was there to convert people to her religion, but she didn't try to convert me. All she did was be nice. And so to this day, whenever anybody says something about that religion, that it's a cult or something, and I don't know, maybe it is. All I know is the one that I met was lovely and kind and helped me. And I want to be that kind of vegan. I want people to say, well, I don't know. I don't know if you get enough protein. I just know the one vegan I met was kind and understanding and seemed pretty healthy.
Mm. And I think it's leading by example, and I also feel the same with that. Yeah, I love a donut, I love pizza, I love these things, but if I eat them every day, I'm not going to be healthiest. Whereas, I will stick to the healthy principles I have and promote in the way that I need to. And hopefully, leading by example like that will make people question their own choices. And that works for me, and like for the people out there that meet me, I'd rather them see me and be like, oh, that's a healthy looking vegan, rather than a vegan that maybe looks like boiled spaghetti or anything else. So like that, a lot of people assume that we look like, or they assume we're like you can't get muscular and things like that. So it's just leading by the example of the person you want to be seen, and that doesn't have to be in veganism. That can be in every different way, shape, or form. Like you just said with Jehovah's Witnesses, like you can be Christian, you can be Jew, you can be, and all these people have various different stereotypes. But as long as you're the outsider when like somebody meets you, you can change their whole perspective on the world that they thought was true.
Absolutely. And it can get a little bit tricky. And this is one of the things that I'm learning from being older, that there's no diet that is going to give us immortality. And the body is, kind of on its way out at a certain point, and we can do everything we can to restore and sustain and make it work as well as possible. But we also have to get over this thing of, oh my gosh, if you're vegan, or heaven forbid, if you're whole food plant based, you don't live to be 103 and fall out of an apple tree. That's basically what has been okay. This is what you do, and you eat well, and you get sleep, and you exercise, and you do all those lifestyle medicine things. And then when you're in the apple tree at 103, you might fall out, rest your soul. But that isn't really how it works in the real world. And so I think we need some kind of really clear messaging that you hedge your bets the very best you can. Certainly first we're going to get rid of, stop exploiting other creatures. And then for reasons of physiology and probably karma, things are going to be better. And then you eat the greens and the beans and the berries and all these amazing foods, and you give yourself the best possible chance of the longest healthy stint on this earth that your genetics will allow. And then if you or somebody else who happens to be vegan or whole food plant-based gets sick, if they die before 90, the first question should not be, what were they doing wrong? No, what we're all doing wrong is we decided to come to Earth and be people instead of stay wherever we were before and be angels.
Yeah, it's true. And I think like that's the thing. There's people that are that are willing to go and do that, and look, we're all not perfect, and we're all going to die at sometime. Like obviously, there's some cultures that live a lot longer, and some people try to replicate that, but that doesn't mean you're going to get the same outcome. So it's just living as best you can for you, because at the end of the day, everything is the same. Like we all have the same end game.
Except that we want to leave here knowing that we've left the world better,
Mm.
knowing that we've done something. And some people say, oh, but I'm not online. I don't have a following. I don't have blah, blah, blah. You have influence. I've seen this. We all have so much influence. It's this ripple thing. And sometimes you'll do something and think it's just nothing, but years later it'll affect somebody. I've had so many experiences of people writing to me. Like when I used to work in offices, I used to write for a magazine back in Kansas City in my 20s. And sometimes I'd get flack for my food, and people would say, "Ooh, that doesn't look very good." And frankly, it didn't look very good because back then, if we were trying to be a healthy vegan, we ate really brown kind of food. And so we'd have like our lentil soup and our wholemeal sandwich and our oatmeal cookie. So even dessert was brown, everything was just brown. But then I've heard from people like that years later. Well, I used to think you were crazy, but my cholesterol went up and my doctor said, blah, blah, blah. Now I eat like you. Or, I never really talked about, you talked about animals and stuff, and I just kind of kept it to myself. But I've changed. I'm in your camp now. Who would ever know this when it's happening? So I just think we need to go out there into the world as like a light source. It's that beautiful a phrase about better to light a candle than curse the darkness. Well, better to be a candle and just lift everything up. And it'll be good, I think, for our movement and certainly for ourselves and the person we lit up.
Mm. Absolutely. Another big part of your life, another huge part of your life is yoga. And it's not like you just kind of discovered this in the last 10 years when it gained popularity. Where did that kind of journey start for you? Because like you've dedicated such a large percentage of your life just to that framework.
For me, I have two giant passions. And one is veganism and ending the suffering of animals. And the other is spirituality and the big picture. So I had my first spiritual experience when I was 3 years old. My nanny took me out in my stroller, and I don't know why we were going out that late at night because it was late and there were stars in the sky. And I'm there in my stroller. I'm two. I was just before my third birthday because we moved on my third birthday. So I'm looking up at the skies and thinking, well, that's home. And I'm here now and I'm doing this and it's okay, but it is not home. And I think a lot of little kids have experiences like that and maybe don't remember them, but it was always very important to me to kind of understand the big picture. I was interested in mysticism, first Christian mysticism, because that was what I was exposed to. My nanny was part of Unity, which is Protestant, very liberal kind of movement that started in the 1890s with a couple of very ethical vegetarians. We didn't have veganism yet. Nobody was thinking or talking about that. But they printed their Bibles with faux leather in the 1890s and wrote extensively about the importance of vegetarianism and how we're never going to have a world peace as long as people are killing animals for food. So she came from that. And I was getting this kind of messaging through my whole childhood. And then when I was 17, I discovered yoga. And it sounds so funny now to say that you had to discover yoga because it's everywhere. And most people have taken a yoga class, and half your friends probably teach yoga, especially if you live in California, half your friends teach
Yeah,
yoga.
it's the same with
And
living in London.
is it? Well, when I moved to London at 18, I walked into Watkins Bookshop, and it's like, oh, this is for me. So Watkins Bookshop, for anybody that doesn't know, is still there. It's in Cecil Court near Trafalgar Square, and it's a spiritual bookstore. So that day that I walked in 1968, the various books were arranged and there were signs, and there would be like ecology, which was a word I'd never heard before. In 1968, the planet seemed fine. Nobody needed to know about that. But then I looked it up. And reincarnation and Christian mysticism and vegetarianism and yoga. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is why I'm here. And there was also a sign for this lovely woman teaching yoga, Stella Churfus. She is 100. She still teaches one chair yoga class a week. She lives in a third floor walk up. She's absolutely an amazing role model. And so, having read the 3 books on yoga that were available in the public library in Kansas City, and then I came to England, and it's like, oh my gosh, it all opened up. So when I say yoga, I don't just mean yoga postures. Even though the classes that I took from Stella were yoga postures and breathing, those are just 2 of the 8 limbs of yoga. So for me, early on, I got very involved in everything that yoga is, which is a spiritual path. It's a spiritual path that is compatible with other spiritual paths. So if a person is a practicing Jew or practicing Christian or something else, they can still do yoga and benefit from yoga. So I was completely sold. And what I was taught was that in the traditional days in India of learning yoga, you didn't get to do asana. You did not get to do a downward dog until you had mastered the moral precepts and the personal disciplines, the yamas and the niyamas. And the very first moral precept is ahimsa, or nonviolence and reverence for life, which of course is at the center of lifestyle choice for any ethical vegan. So my life in yoga is not that I ever became an incredible asana practitioner. I mean, I'm not doing asana on Instagram, but this way of life that starts with nonviolence and then moves into non-lying and non-stealing and just basically trying to be a decent person, but trying to be a decent person for some very powerful reasons of making the world better, of growing your soul. And every part of yoga is designed for spiritual growth, and everything that it does for health is in service to this spiritual growth. And so later on, I also learned about Ayurveda, which is specifically about health. Ayurveda is yoga's sister science. And I'm doing so many exciting things with that these days. The book Aged Like a Yogi, of course, is yoga and Ayurveda for doing well in our later years. But I'm also doing a lot with what I call ahimsa Ayurveda, because a lot of people say, well, Ayurveda, they use ghee and everything. And it's like, well, yeah, but that doesn't mean you can't get benefit from everything else and leave out the ghee. And the diet too in Ayurveda is very much designed for digestive efficiency and doesn't necessarily bring in or even allow for some of these super nutrient dense foods that we know are so important. And so I'm working with a concept that I call the Phyto-Veda diet. And phyto, we know, means plants. So a way to use Ayurvedic principles so that we're digesting all of our food, so that we're not feeling uncomfortable. And a lot of ex-vegans, it's like, oh, I don't know, I did that, but I just didn't quite feel right. And if you really press them, they're talking about gas and constipation and that kind of thing, which Ayurveda is so wonderful for fixing. And then we can also do it in a way that includes properly prepared and in the right quantities, the greens and the beans and all the stuff that we know is so important for vitality forever.
How you've described yoga is so different to how yoga seems to be approached now. Like if you go to California, like if you go to New York, like if you go to London or Bali or wherever, like yoga for most people is just like an alternative exercise of, instead of going to the gym, instead of going and getting into gym culture, many people do it to, just get fit now, which of course is a bonus. But obviously for you, yoga has such a deeper meaning and you have such a deeper understanding of it. Whereas for most people, it is like 60 minutes of exercise, turn up, yoga, sweat, leave, get a coffee and a croissant. And that's all it is for them. Whereas yoga is, I assume for you and a large majority of people as well that aren't in that space, it's still a very big way of life.
Hmm. I think the more people are into it, and if they read a book or even do a web search, it's not difficult to get to some of the underside of yoga. Now, there are some kinds of yoga studios. I mean, Jiva Mukti Yoga, for example, is very much about ahimsa, very much about veganism. In fact, the co-founder of Jiva Mukti Yoga, Sharon Gannon, wrote the foreword to Age Like a Yogi. Very proud of that. But if you're just getting yoga somewhere where it seems only like exercise, there are a couple of things you can know. I've heard it said that what sets the physical part of yoga apart from Western exercise is two things, the breath and the intention. So go into your yoga class where maybe your teacher will not say anything about the spiritual parts or the deeper meanings of yoga, but go in with the intention, I am here to heal my body, my mind, and my soul. And just go in knowing that, and you've got the intention. And then, whether your teacher is talking much about the breath or not, you want to incorporate that because it's so important. And it's really easy with yoga to get the breathing because whenever you're standing tall, whenever you're reaching up, whenever you're reaching out, you're inhaling. And whenever you're folding forward, whenever you're bending, that's exhale. Now, if you've done Pilates, you know that's kind of the opposite of Pilates breathing. But it makes so much sense in yoga because when you're reaching up and your diaphragm is open, you can really get in a lot of that wonderful oxygen. So you do your practice with intention and with breath. And then just do a little research. Just find out what are these yamas? What are these niyamas? And the truth is, there's such wonderful precepts for living your life. They're just kind of a good checklist of, well, how am I doing today? And there's one like non-stealing. And most of us are like, well, I'll check that off. I don't steal stuff. But just think about it. What are we stealing from future generations when we're using plastic in that? And I'm still not completely off plastic. So that's definitely one I'm working on myself. How about if we steal somebody's thunder? How about if somebody is just so excited, they're talking about, their kid got into this fabulous college, and then we have to jump up and say, oh, my kid got into college too, and they got a full scholarship. It's like, maybe if we can just tone some of that stuff down, it counts under the non-stealing. It's just a beautiful way to build character. And I think if we look around at the world, the real world, and certainly the social media world, there seems to be an epidemic of character death. And so anything we can do to build that in ourselves and in our children is a really good thing.
I think with that, I think you've just nailed it on the head. Really, is like modern life in general has kind of seemed to have been designed to kind of pull us apart from our nature and how we would have been. Because I think like when you hear somebody getting excited about like that kid getting into college, your initial reaction should be like, "Hey, like that's amazing, that's incredible." However, because we're seeing so many amazing things around the world consistently, it kind of ungrounds us to the fact that we feel like we have to compete constantly. And you see that throughout so many different, like you see that in like gym culture, you see that in various other cultures, who looks bigger, who looks better, who looks, healthier. And I think it is designed to, pull us apart from each other. And, it's which at the core is something that could actually ground us if we just kind of took some time to make that intention to get onto the right track and not think of it as like a workout, or like, just a hustle to get fitter. Just kind of ground yourself with intention, like you should every day, realistically. Like, even if you're not doing yoga, like, you should probably always go into a day with some sort of intention for it to be a good day.
And I think the idea of yoga and truly any of these ancient wisdom traditions, religions, I mean, religion gets a lot of flack because of the way it's presented. But if you really get down to the core, the underside of these ancient teachings, it's what Aldous Huxley called the perennial philosophy. And that is the idea that there is meaning in life, that we are more than what we see. We're more than the physical body. We're more than the physical brain. That whatever this essence is that created, sustains, whatever, all that we see and what we don't see, isn't some entity that you can either believe in or not believe in. It's the essence of who we are. And the real point of yoga is to come to know that. And there are different ways to do it. There are different personalities. So there's something called jnana yoga, which is the yoga of self-knowledge. Scientists and engineers love that. There's a wonderful book and an old movie. The book was by Somerset Maugham called The Razor's Edge, which is taken from a phrase in the Upanishads, which are yogic scriptures, Indian scriptures. And that's more of that, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Until I really know that I am Brahman, we would say in yoga. And then there are other kinds of yogis that are just all about love and devotion, the bhakti yogis. And their thing isn't so much that they need to know that they're the divine. They just want to love the divine. And I think George Harrison's song, My Sweet Lord, really emphasizes, what that is. And so there are different ways to get there. But if we just know that this is not random, we don't have to understand it. And what we do come to understand, we don't have to agree on. Just that it's almost like placing a bet on this means something. And I decided a long time ago that we have a choice. We can live our lives as if it is about toy collection. How much money can you make? How good can you look to other people? How much stuff can you have? Or that it actually has meaning in everything we do, whether that's in our work for animals or humans or making people healthier or whatever it is, that there's more to it than we think. And to me, in terms of like age like a yogi, the greatest suggestion for youth preservation is to believe every single day that life has meaning and it matters. And there's something big going on here. And oh my goodness, how did we get so lucky to be able to be part of it?
Have you seen a lot of these new age yogas? I don't know how I feel about them, actually. It's, obviously you got the faster flows and you got the hotter rooms, and then you got things like dogs and kitten yoga and then goat yoga. And I know in London they do beer yoga, and like, I know those things are predominantly for fun. I don't think anybody's actually getting anything done. I don't think they're getting any yoga done if you've got kittens and like goats crawling off all over you and things like that. But is that something like, does that kind of water down the idea of yoga?
It does, but it also opens the door.
Hmm.
It's sort of like we were talking before about vegan meats and vegan donuts and things. People can argue, well, that's not going to clear your arteries and cure your heart disease. Yeah, maybe not, but it can open the door to people to find out other things. And so I think it's interesting to me to see all these variations of yoga, because when I started out, there was just yoga. We didn't even have vinyasa. I remember when I first heard that people were teaching a kind of yoga where they just kept moving and didn't stop after each posture. It seemed like blasphemy to me, because the kind of yoga that I knew to be yoga was you perform the posture and you hold it. And the teaching was that in the hold, that's when the body can process, that's when the body can take in and really make the changes happen. Because something about the physical part of yoga is that it's not just about bones and muscles and joints. It is about that, certainly, because it's physical movement. But these postures were designed to have an influence on internal organs. And so some of them are going to be working with digestion and elimination. And some of them are going to be working on the brain for more calmness. And there are incredible studies. One of the great things about contemporary yoga is science has been looking at it. And so there are studies about, I know there was one they looked at people doing Kundalini yoga, and Kundalini yoga is really, I would call it harsh. It's a lot of really heavy breathing. I would, generally speaking, tell older people not to start with that one. And yet they were looking at that kind of yoga for people with early Alzheimer's and how they were able to get clinically noticeable changes, a stoppage in progression of brain deterioration. So there's so much going on with yoga that I think it's fine to shop around and find one that really feels like the right kind for you. And if you're young and if you're athletic, and if maybe you've thought, I don't want to do yoga, I don't want to do that thing where you hardly move, well, find one where you move a lot, where you sweat a lot. It's still yoga. And then if you want this other kind, it's there for you too. And it's also going to be there if you're doing the super athletic kind now. 40 years from now, you might want the other kind, at least part of the time. And I know I used to be a little bit kind of snooty about the chair yoga. It's like, oh, please, if you just get up and down off the floor every day, you'll be able to do it for the rest of your life. But I have enough experience now to know that, you know what? You can get something wrong with your back. You can get some arthritis in your knees. And just getting down on the floor is not going to be as dependable as it used to be. And chair yoga can be an actual workout. There's a wonderful book by Giovanna Heyman, who happens to be vegan, called Accessible Yoga. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about it, that it is this beautiful way of being in the world that can be with you from childhood. I mean, kids love yoga because most of the poses are named for animals, and they get to be a camel and they get to be a rabbit. That's all fun. And then in very, very much later life, chair yoga, breathing, it's a cradle to grave thing.
Mm. Yeah, I used to have a misconception on yoga until I started yoga, and then went and found the ones I liked, and I did try Kundalini, and it's hard. Even for someone that is fairly, active and like does a lot of sport, it's hard. It's like so yeah, like if you are old, please don't start with that one.
Well, one of the fun ones, I've been pretty consistent. I've stuck with the kind of hatha yoga, Shivananda lineage. And even though it's pronounced Shiva, it's spelled Sivananda lineage. Integral yoga is very much like that. And it's pretty much what I've done my whole life. But I will say that for my 65th birthday, I gave myself an aerial yoga class as a
Wow.
present. And aerial yoga is so much fun. I've done it here in New York. I've done it in London. I've done it in Toronto. So whenever I travel, I try to look for a place and see, what's different. And what's really fun about it, we think about meditation as meditation, and that's important. I mean, it's so important. Even if you don't do yoga, even if you don't consider yourself spiritual at all, just for your physical health, to take 10, 15 minutes a day and just be quiet, watch your breath, or have a nice affirmation. It is just so, so important, physically, mentally, spiritually, everything. But this aerial yoga, kind of like an adventure sport, is also a kind of meditation because you're forced to be fully present, because it's not dangerous and it's much easier than it looks. And in aerial yoga, if you did fall on your head, it would only be like a couple of feet, but you don't want to fall on your head. And so you have to be really, really focused. And that's a lot of fun.
You speak a lot about aging like a yogi, and obviously you're 75, I think. You are 75, right?
I
Yeah.
am, yes.
And obviously, with the way you live, the practices obviously you've implemented, it's definitely worked. Like I would say, like I've looked at pictures from you younger, you 10 years ago, you now, and you look exactly the same. You haven't aged.
Huh.
You haven't aged. And obviously, there's not much difference in how you look. You still look so young. So what is that secret? Because I'm sure you probably know of him. Actually, I think we spoke about it on your podcast, which was Brian Johnson. Obviously, the longevity guy in the States. Vigorous routines, eats very strict. 500 supplements a day, gets his son's blood fused into him, whatever insane stuff he does. And I respect him for it because nobody else is out there doing it to kind of for science. However, your lifestyle and his lifestyle are so different. Whereas you are at the age you are now, you look healthy, you look young still. So what is that secret? Is it just yoga and eating good?
Well, I'll answer theoretically and personally, because I think there are kind of two answers and they do juxtapose. So theoretically, I mean, certainly what we know about whole food, plant-based eating and just exercise and trying to do some stress management, all these things are not typically how people live. So there's that. I also believe that just being vegan, you get this gift from the universe. It's just like the animals saying thank you. Thank you for moving our cause forward. And just most of the older vegans that I know have this kind of light and energy about them that omnivores just don't have, even the ones who have tried to live healthfully. Now, in Ayurveda, there is a really revolutionary secret for delaying some of the negative aspects of growing older. And that is to pacify vata dosha. And I may have just said two words that a lot of people don't know what they mean. So to keep it really simple, in Ayurveda, there's this idea of three energies. There's one called kapha, and that is earth and water. And there's one called pitta, that is fire and water. And then there's one called vata, which is air and ether. So we're all a combination of these, and you can take a dosha quiz online. I like the one at banyanbotanicals.com. It's an Ayurvedic store. I'm not an affiliate. I don't get anything by telling you that URL. It's just, I think it's a good quiz, but you can find them elsewhere as well. And so we are this doshic makeup from the time of conception, and that doesn't change. But we are influenced throughout life by one of them. So in childhood, we're all influenced more by kapha, and in kind of young adulthood, midlife, we're influenced by pitta. And then when we get to be a little bit older, and there's not really an exact age there, I kind of say 55, you start to notice, regardless of who you are, regardless of your own personal prakriti or doshic makeup, you might find your skin getting drier and your hair and your nails and your eyes. And it's like, what is happening? I feel like an autumn leaf. That's vata. You might also find yourself getting colder. I used to wonder why here in the States, all the old people moved to Florida and Arizona. And then I got old and it's like, oh, now I get it. It's because we're cold. And then digestive issues. And we know, in the vegan and plant-based world where we it just breaks our heart, to lose somebody when somebody says, oh, I just couldn't do it any longer. I just wasn't digesting my food well. And that's vata too. And where you used to have, cast iron digestion, and then all of a sudden, you can't eat beans or cabbage anymore. What just happened? And so Ayurveda offers these wonderful suggestions for pacifying vata dosha. And they're very simple. I go into a lot of detail in Age Like a Yogi, but just generally speaking, you want to keep warm. You want to have warm, comforting foods, porridge, khichdi, which is a kind of savory Indian porridge that Ayurveda loves. It's based on split mung beans or baby lentils and basmati rice, vegetables and spices, warm almond milk with spices in it. warm baths, just kind of having a sweater or a shawl or something so that you just always feel warm. Keeping a regular routine. For example, we were talking that I was just on the holistic holiday at sea, which was wonderful. And I knew that I was going to be going out to the West Coast where the time zones are 3 hours earlier than where I live in New York. What I didn't realize was that when we actually went to Alaska, that was going to be 4 hours earlier. So to get recovered from that, it's just taken me more time than it would have taken earlier in my life because there is more of this vata flighty kind of energy to kind of tone down, which just means allowing a little more time, a little protection from the loud noises, violent movies, things like that, just not good for vata. Let's just keep it calm. So that's a theoretical answer to your question. And now I'll give a personal answer. So I'm 75. I've been vegan since I was 33, pretty much whole food plant based, just because back in the day we didn't have that phrase, but that was pretty much what we knew we needed to be. Um, have always practiced yoga, have never been a great exerciser otherwise, never got into running or any of that. Probably would have been a good thing if I had. Um, a lot of stress, like right now. My husband has difficulties. He had an undiagnosed seizure disorder. He fell onto the subway tracks just before the pandemic, and that's led to other difficulties. So I am a caregiver. If anybody does that, if anybody has someone that you're taking care of in your life, I highly recommend the book The Unexpected Journey. It's a new New York Times bestseller by Emma Hemming Willis, the wife of the actor Bruce Willis, who has a kind of dementia. And she states in there that caregivers have such terrible statistics for life and health. Very often, caregivers die before the person that they're caring for. So I am under a lot of stress, and I have had some things happen, some health difficulties of my own, which, I've gotten through, which is wonderful. Gotten through everything. I don't take any pharmaceuticals. I've been very fortunate in that. I don't do well with drugs. I don't like drugs. I understand that the time will probably come when something will befall me, and the only answer is to take a pharmaceutical drug. And that'll be sad because I know that it won't have a vegan heritage. I know that any drug has got animal testing in its background, and I'm very sorry for that, should that happen for me. But, we have to do what we have to do to get along. So I would just say, if people think I look younger than my age, thank you very much. I appreciate that. My ego appreciates that. But if it helps the animals, then whatever it takes, I'll do that.
For people looking to, get younger or age, age better, age younger, get into yoga, just to people listening, that might sound like for some people, it might sound like more luxury framing, I guess. Um, for people with like fewer resources and maybe health inequities, how does how would you make that path accessible and not seem for some people they see it as elitist, but for somebody wanting to pave a way but just making it accessible to everyone, what are those kind of steps that you would say like are the tangible things somebody can bring into their lives just to make it easier on themselves?
Absolutely. I hate it when people think that any of this stuff is elitist. It breaks my heart. It's like, I was vegan and practicing yoga when I was widowed in my late 30s. I was a single mom living in a little cabin in the central Missouri Ozarks. It never occurred to me for a minute that there was anything elitist about the way we ate or, the way we lived. And I don't really understand where all that came from. And I almost wonder if some of it was kind of planted from the other side, from the people who
I
don't want us to be
feel that.
vegan. Um, but basically, I think it's first to get a sense that you matter, that your life matters, and that you're here for a reason, regardless of what you're going through, that you really do matter and you're connected to everybody. There's a beautiful poem by Francis Thompson that has a line in it: "Thou canst not disturb a flower without troubling a star." We truly are connected, and everything we do ripples out. So I would just suggest waking up in the morning and reminding yourself that regardless of what you have to go through in the coming day, and believe me, the way things are for me now with the caregiving and all that, sometimes I feel like, I'm getting up every day and going into battle. But you and I have to remind ourselves that whatever is facing us, we can do it. And we can do it with all those to whom we're connected. So I'd say that would be the first thing. Then, in terms of like veganism, it can be very simple. And in fact, most people who've done it for a while end up eating very simply. I know that sometimes we can attract people with all kinds of fancy recipes and things that look like animal products and things that look like they came from some kind of super exclusive restaurant. And a lot of people are foodies and they really love watching people cook and stuff like that. But what's really going on, even in the kitchens of those people who are doing all those fancy demonstrations, is just really, really simple. So for me, for example, I get up every day and I have an Ayurvedic chocolate shake. It's um, kind of my rendition of one in the book called Ayurvedic Vegan Recipes by Talia Lutzker. But I changed it a little bit. It's non-dairy milk and flaxseed and cacao powder and what I call morning spices. I mix the nutmeg, cinnamon, ginger, cardamom, all that stuff together so I can just spoon it out in the morning. And I use some amla powder, which is the highest antioxidant food in common usage, and a couple of bananas when they're ripe. When the bananas aren't ripe, I always kind of go through a little bit of grief and have to do a different kind of breakfast. But I do that. And then for lunch, it's usually like beans and greens, some rendition of beans, greens, other vegetables, and again, lots of spices because those spices are so health promoting. And then dinner is lighter because as an Ayurveda person, I really believe in honoring the digestive fire, which is hottest in the middle of the day. And, and maybe there is a little bit of elitism in that I work from home and not everybody does. And sometimes it's harder to have that midday meal in the middle of the day. But if you can, and on the days that you can, your digestion is likely to work a little better if you do. So supper is pretty simple. Sometimes it's just some non-dairy yogurt and some berries. Try to get in Dr. Furman's G bombs, the greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, seeds. Did I leave out a berries and seeds? And or maybe it'll be some soup and some kind of bread. I can't really bake bread, but I can kind of make chapati. I can do flat bread. And so it's really simple, doesn't cost a lot, doesn't take a whole lot of time, doesn't make a really big mess. And then the third thing I'll just say, about yoga is very readily available. You can find hundreds, maybe thousands of yoga teachers and yoga classes on YouTube. And if you are vegan and you want your yoga teacher to be vegan, you can just put in there vegan yoga and you can just start watching and start practicing and see what resonates. And it might take 4 or 5 or 10 tries, but the great thing about YouTube is it's not costing you anything. So just keep trying. And again, you don't have to do it an hour a day, but maybe you could do 10 minutes in the evening so you don't wake up stiff in the morning, and maybe 10 minutes in the morning, and then a little breathing, and then some quiet time for meditation. And then you've got it going on. I mean, I came up with an acronym several years ago, me in the morning, ME, meditation and exercise. Because if I take care of me, if you take care of me, as you say it about yourself in the morning, then all the rest of that stuff is going to take care of itself. And then I kind of added on later, I turned it into a thing I call the MEND program: meditation, exercise, nourishment, and detox. So that's all good too. But basically, if you just keep it simple and start where you are, it doesn't have to cost anything and it pays you everything.
I think that was perfectly put. Is there something that you still struggle with, that you still slip up on, or that's more tempting to compromise in your own kind of vegan or spiritual or ethical code? Is there something that obviously, because I think we all slip up once in a while on something whereas we don't do our meditation or something for, like, the evening because you've got something better to do, or like instead of eating whole foods plant-based, you'd get a pizza or a donut. Is there something that like you slip up on a constant that's kind of makes everybody, like, makes us all seem human?
Well, it's all very human. So I do not slip up on being vegan. I mean, certainly there have been times when I've gone to the place for a chai tea and the first sip, I know,
Yeah, there's a taste.
yeah, I know that's from a cow, but I would never say, oh, well, gosh, I'm really hungry and there's nothing good here that's vegan, so I'll just have the cheese sandwich. I don't do that. There was a time, years and years and years ago that I might have. So that part, that's my line in the sand. I am vegan. That I've got. And then the other stuff, yeah, it's difficult. Um, I have been consistent in my life about meditation, sometimes for 15 years, and then would kind of fall away and not be as consistent. But it's really important. And one of the things that helps me kind of prioritize, because something that I think is happening to a lot of people nowadays is that in addition to the fact that we are all working so much, oh my gosh, we're practically working ourselves to death. Everybody I know, I think in this digital era, excuse me, because there's not like a sign on the door, open and closed, and there doesn't seem to be a weekend. I mean, it's just the emails and the messages, keep on coming. Doesn't matter what day it is, doesn't matter if it's a holiday. And that's really tough. And sometimes we just have to say, okay, you may not be closed for business because it happens to be 11:30 on a Saturday night. I am closed for business. I can do that. And I think sometimes we just have to get up and start over. And I mean, I know people that are so disciplined. I know people, for example, David Lynch, the filmmaker, was very big in transcendental meditation. He passed away in the last year. But I remember reading that from the time he studied transcendental meditation, which is 20 minutes twice a day, so that's quite a commitment, he never, ever, ever didn't do a meditation. Whether he was traveling, making movies, under the weather, whatever, he never, ever missed. That is really cool. Nobody's going to put that in my obituary, but I still get up every day with the intention. And most days I manage, and some days I don't.
I think that's the thing. I really resonate with the fact that, obviously working, you kind of end up working weekends, and like, obviously checking your phone, checking your emails, and we know we shouldn't be. We should be having a weekend. We should be having a break. We should be doing all these different things. However, yeah, that's one thing that I definitely, as much as I kind of preach sometimes, also fall back on, because it's so easy to do it as well. Like, or the fact that, like, once again, like the meditation, much like you, if I skip a day, it's harder to get back into that than if I did that consistently. And it's just that creating compounding evidence over time that hopefully you can get that consistent, and that one day won't put you off.
Yeah. And I think too, we've kind of created this thing where self care is another job. Oh my gosh. Not only are there 14 emails left unanswered, not only did I not post a video yesterday, but I also didn't do my warm oil massage, and I didn't do my dry skin brushing, and I only meditated once. It's like, you know what? You're right on time, doing fine, honey. I mean, we've just got to be nice to ourselves.
Yeah, that's true. Victoria, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. For the people that obviously want to know more about you, find out more about you, want to read your books, want to, well, everything and anything of Victoria, where can they find you?
Oh, thank you for letting me share that. So the new book is Age Like a Yogi, and there's also an audio. I'm so excited. It's on Audible and audiobooks.com, and I got to read it, which was really, really fun. So that's the book. And if you would like the recipe guide, e-guide that goes with the book, it's called Recipes to Help You Age Like a Yogi. I would invite you to subscribe to a weekly blog. I write it once a month, and my Main Street Vegan Academy graduates write the rest of the time, and my occasional newsletter. And you would do that at mainstreetvegan.com. That's also where you can find out about Main Street Vegan Academy, which is a program that I've been doing since 2012 that trains and certifies vegan lifestyle coaches and educators in a wonderful real-time live Zoom format where you actually get to talk to these instructors, and we have all kinds of wonderful follow-up after. So do check that out at mainstreetvegan.com and subscribe and get the e-guide cooking ebook. I also have an author website, victoriamoran.com, and you can find me pretty much everywhere online at Victoria Moran Author, except YouTube didn't have enough characters to be Victoria Moran Author. So it's now Victoria Moran NYC. That may change, but everything is in flux. And thank you. And thanks for letting me share all that, Callum.
Don't worry, I will link that all in the show notes as well.
Bless you.
So if anybody is curious, then just down below.
Can
Victoria,
I just share one other thing? Because you were talking about, strength and fitness and stuff of vegans. My daughter is a lifelong vegan, and I'm not going to tell you her age, but I'm 75. So you can kind of figure out she's not 16. And she is a professional aerialist and stunt performer. So she is on Instagram at Adair, Adair stunts. So if you got any carnivore friends saying, oh, all those people that say they're vegan bodybuilders, they built all that muscle back when they were eating meat. Well, Adair has never had an animal product ever. And I always make sure I never bump into her because I don't want to break anything.
I will definitely check that out. I can't wait to look.
Thanks, Callum. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I'm grateful for you.
I'm grateful for you back.